right. Hey, Stuart.
Good morning.
Good morning. So I'm so excited to welcome an old friend and congregant, Stuart Davidson, to be with me here today for our 4-question series. And just have to tell a funny little throwback story, maybe, I don't know, 15 years ago or so.
No, probably closer to, maybe 15
Yeah.
because he had to study for a while.
Yeah. So Stuart called me. I don't even know if there was texting back in that time. And we sat down at an Einstein's Bagel. And he said, I'm not really sure about all this Jewish stuff, but my son wants to have a bar mitzvah.
He did.
And we had a good conversation. His son did have a bar mitzvah. Thank you for allowing me to do that.
One of the great experiences of his life.
And also his daughter. But we kind of did at that point start a spiritual conversation about what Judaism is about, how we can believe all this stuff, what's true, what's not true, how it plays a role in our actual lives. And so when this series came about, you were top of my list of the congregants to want to share these questions with. So thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm looking forward to it. I think we've been thinking and talking about this for about 10 years now. So didn't know if it was ever going to happen.
Yeah, no. And once you said, can we have like a debate or something? Yeah, you did float that idea. So here we are.
If it goes well enough, maybe we'll invite the congregation.
Absolutely. We're going on tour. All right. So the first question is, well, let me say it this way. Judaism is a big thing, right? It's not just one small thing. And so in your experience growing up, in your young adult life, in your adult life, what have been some of the positive experiences that you've had with Judaism? And why would you say you even entertain the possibility of living a Jewish life? What are the anchors or the strong or the highlights that you've experienced?
That actually is more of a deep question than you probably realize, and we can get into that a little. There's no question that when I grew up in Buffalo, New York, I had a Jewish household. My parents were fairly religious, but still Reformed, went to temple fairly frequently, but definitely on the high holidays. And we did celebrate Friday night Shabbat. So it was a thing for my family growing up. So I would say for about like the first 14 years of my life, I would say there were a lot of very profound and fundamental things about Judaism that I enjoyed.
Okay.
I enjoyed and still revere the culture, the traditions, the focus on family. And as I got a little bit older and learned about Judaism, at least in America, Jewish Americans' involvement in the civil rights movement and the fight for social justice, that certainly endeared the religion to me. But I would probably be remiss if I didn't tell you that I had a moment when I was about 14 and my grandfather passed away that started my questioning life. And I'm not sure that ever left me.
Okay. So
I do have a lot of very strong, truly enjoyable memories of growing up Jewish, especially around the dinner table. I think that's a big thing.
Sure.
And but as I've gotten older, I became more concerned about the time I was spending and had spent as a child going to a temple and praying. That certainly is something that has given me pause and maybe created some type of dichotomy in my brain about the positives versus, I'm not going to say negatives, but things that I wasn't sure I should have been spending my time on. But all that being said, as you pointed out, my son and my daughter both got bar and bat mitzvahed by you, and those were two of the most amazing experiences of our family's lives, and we appreciate it, and thank you very much. But that was their choice. They decided to do that, and we told them that if they do it, they have to do it full bore and never complain. And I think if you ask them today, they would say that was the best day, one of the best days of their lives, for sure.
That's really good. That's amazing. So I'm thinking about what you said, that it caused you concern.
Yeah.
You know, when your grandfather passed away, and maybe it sounded like a little bit of regret that you had spent time doing that as a teenager, or kind of a evolving, adolescent. Say more about that, and what were the concerns that were coming to you?
Sure. So I think that when people die in our lives, and it's part of just being a human being, nobody lives forever. I think it is natural for all of us to question why. You lose somebody you love, and you don't understand why that would happen. And if there is a God, why they would do that to you, even though my grandfather was 84 and he lived a great life. But it just started me questioning the notion of God.
Okay.
And I started thinking back on all the times and all of the hours spent in a temple praying. And I started wondering what I was praying to. And my father actually got concerned about me losing my faith. And I don't know if I ever told you this, but he actually asked me to go to lunch with the rabbi at a large temple in Buffalo, New York. Great guy. And he sat me down at lunch and tried to explain to me why I should believe in God, and specifically the God of the Torah, and asked me where morality comes from if there is no God. Very fundamental, difficult question. And I asked him a question that I don't think he was ready for. And that question was, Rabbi, if your parents weren't Jewish and their parents weren't Jewish, can you say for sure that you would be Jewish? And if you can't, what does that say about your faith? And that, I think, his stumbling to answer that question, gave me kind of more of a reason to start just asking more questions. I am not going to say, and I would never say, I know the answers to everything. I certainly don't. The question ultimately for me becomes, do all unanswerable questions need an answer? The why. Do we need to know why? For some people, they do.
And do you feel like you're one of those that you need to know why?
I absolutely do not. I'm willing to bet that at some point, science will tell us the answer to things, like it has over the course of the last 10,000 years. But I'm willing to accept that that the life we have as human beings and conscious beings is so complex that we may never know certain answers.
And is the question of why, is it, why do we behave a certain way if we don't believe in God? Or is it, why do bad things happen to good people? If you had to articulate what's the essential struggle with the why?
Sure. I think for most people I think the foundational question for people is, why are we here?
Why are we here?
Right? And why does the human system, as complex as it is, and as remarkable as it is, the brain being obviously the most remarkable, we don't understand consciousness at all. Those questions are difficult for people to understand without believing that there is some purpose behind it all. Whereas the Darwinian answer would be, that's what billions of years of evolution provided.
Keeps us alive.
Right. So there's a lot of unanswerable questions. I'm not sure it's so much as, why do bad things happen to good people? I think I know why, because there's bad people in the world and there are bad things, but that actually begs a lot more questions that I don't even think God can answer, such as, why do thousands of children die of excruciating bone cancer every year? That just doesn't seem to compute with the notion of a good, loving, just God. Well, what's the purpose of that? So those are the types of questions that I ask myself, and I don't know the answer.
And so I'm proud of you that you can kind of sit with the unknowing, right? Because that's not a posture we can have when we're 14.
Right.
But as an adult, you can. And I think for me, Judaism is a place, obviously, that really encourages questions as opposed to other religions, which, of course, I'm not an expert in. But my experience is that people who are questioning are more welcome. And, it's my little PSA for Judaism. It's and not only is it a welcome concept within Judaism, but it's essential. It's really essential to be a questioner as a Jew. We're not asked that we have no, whatever it's called in Catholicism, what's it called? Catechism. We don't have that. We have commandments. We have things that we're supposed to do with our actions, but there's no commandment about belief.
I completely agree. And that is certainly one of the reasons why when Suzanne, my wife, and I had children, we had to decide. We have three choices: Judaism, the religion I was brought up in, Catholicism, the religion that she was brought up in, or nothing. Which at the time was probably where I leaned, but there's a lot of other issues that come along with that. You don't want your kids to be an outcast. You don't know when your kid's gonna find their own spirituality. So we decided, pretty much for the reasons you just said, that Judaism was the place for us to raise our children, even though we weren't going to be like Torah carrying, real religious Jews. We would identify that way. And so both for the reasons I said earlier as to what I found great about the religion and the faith is the culture, the tradition, the family, the social justice, on top of what you just said. There is no proselytizing in Judaism. It does make it much different than other and more welcoming than other religions. I'm not going to criticize other religions. Everybody's got their
different paths.
They're different paths, and you can find faults in every group, whether it be a religion or not. Nobody's perfect, but I did have a real good feeling about the welcomingness of Judaism, and that you always felt loved in the religion. There was no judgment by the quote-unquote authorities. They didn't judge you. They don't judge me for my questioning. Kind of to your point, they want to answer my questions. I'm sure you're dying to answer all my questions, but
I'm restraining myself.
But they don't. But they do not judge. There is no. I'll give you a perfect example. And again, now, this isn't a criticism of Christianity, but it's just a point, which is that according to Christian doctrine, if you do not accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior before you die, you are going to hell. There is no exception.
Right.
There just isn't. And that is just not only crazy to me, but it ignores all the people who've never even heard the word Jesus Christ. All the people who live in the a tribe in the Amazon, or in in Egypt. I mean, that doesn't make sense to me. So but Judaism doesn't have that, and I appreciate that. There's no question that out of the major religions, Judaism is the most accepting, understanding, compassionate, in my view. And in my view, I don't think wars get started by Jews. They just have, over the centuries, they've certainly been started by the other major religions, which says a lot about those religions. But and maybe it's because we've been such a minority for so long, we don't really have the strength to do that. But it's a peaceful religion, above all. We've never had a crusade, right? Or a jihad. But we've certainly been on the wrong end of those.
Wrong end. Yeah. Cool stuff, Stuart.
Interesting, right?
Yeah. And so my brain's going 1,000 miles with all your commentary, but I think normally I would ask you what's something that's challenging for you about Judaism, but I think you've actually addressed that, and I'm more curious to hear from you how, in terms of science and being like a modern, compassionate human being, normally I would ask, religion versus spirituality.
Right.
And I kind of sense where you are on that, but I'm curious, how the good parts of Judaism and maybe the challenges, like how do you manage? How do you mix and match? Like, what is your formula for, what you do Jewishly, what you accept from kind of societal
Yep.
spirituality? What's your makeup, and how would you guide someone who says, I want to be Jewish but not too religious, I have these social values, I want to be a good person, or even like how you guide your children?
Sure, it's a great question. There's actually a few questions baked into
Yeah,
that one
naturally.
question. But I think for somebody who is, I think if they find Judaism to be a place of comfort, and they enjoy just the people and being around the people and the traditions, and the family aspect of it, I mean, that is certainly something to grab onto.
And do you, sorry, can I just follow
please.
up on that? So do you feel like, in our world, you're raising kids and living in a modern world, does it give you any comfort that Shabbat and holidays and those things are kind of prescribed? Or would you, as more of a creative person, feel like, yeah, I want to make my own Shabbat. Tuesday is going to be my Shabbat. I used to think I work on Saturday, so Shabbat is a work day. And I always loved Wednesday was my traditional day off. I'm like, Wednesday's actually my Shabbat where I rest.
Right.
And Saturday is my Shabbat where I, do a different kind of work, which I enjoy, but it's not really a day of rest. And so I'm just, but we can't, I'm just wondering how, in your intellectual point of view, how can we, is the point to recreate something and to reframe it, or is it to take what we have and integrate it the best that we can? Like if you were the boss and you had the big paintbrush of how, religion and spirituality were going to be most successful in the world, to create, because ultimately the goal is to create the best human beings, right? The people who are the kindest and compassionate and take care of the world and do the best good, do the most good.
So you actually, I think, hit the nail on the head with your last comment, which is how do you, I think the foundational question is, how do you live a good moral life without the benefit of religion? And I think that can be done, and I think it's done by millions of people all the time. The question is, does that morality come from a book that was written 6,000 years ago, or for many others, 2,000 years ago? Or does it come from something else in nature? I have always subscribed, since I was an adult, to the notion that morality is on a spectrum. On the one end of the spectrum is maximizing well-being, and on the other end of the spectrum is maximizing like suffering. Okay. And so the greatest thing, the most moral thing you can do is to maximize the well-being of as many people as possible. That'd be the greatest good. Whereas the more people you hurt, the more suffering that you give to others, that your act may cause, it's the worst thing you can do. So we always talk about the Holocaust and Hitler and Mussolini and the Japanese. I mean, those were, and Stalin. I mean, we all agree, I think, as a species, that was probably the worst suffering that's ever been on this earth by human beings. So that would be at the end of like the most evil or the most immoral. Whereas the people who do like what you do, and the people who give charity and they work their whole lives in social justice and to help others, and the Mother Teresa's of the world, the ones that want nothing for themselves and they want to but maximize the well-being of others, that would be like the greatest good and the most moral. And I think morality kind of sits on a spectrum that way. But it's hard for me to subscribe to the notion that a book that human beings wrote, thousands of years ago, is where we should find our morality. And I would kind of point you to the Ten Commandments, right? I look at the Ten Commandments and I say, are these really the most important morals and ethical rules that we should live by?
It doesn't feel like it's sufficient or accurate to you?
It doesn't feel accurate. It doesn't feel like, I mean, I don't know that taking the Lord's name in vain really kind of should rise above raping a child. I don't know that honoring your father and your mother, where you may have been molested as a kid, or your parent may have disowned you because you were gay. I don't know why. There's no exceptions in the Ten Commandments, right? So,
but there is commentary.
Yeah, but the commentary is not in the original
True.
Torah. And so does the Torah, should the Torah really guide the maximization of well-being of others? And I would say that it shouldn't, but if you look at it my way, you would say guide yourself by trying to find happiness for yourself and happiness for others without hurting people. That's how I guide my life, and that's how I would ask other people to guide their lives. At the same time, there is a place for groups, and there's a place for culture and belonging for sure. We all need that. And but Judaism certainly doesn't have kind of a stranglehold on that, but it's one that certainly shows a lot of love and compassion to others. I think, I mean, just to give an example, I'm pretty sure that the rabbi that bar mitzvahed me in 1984 was the first rabbi in the United States to marry a homosexual couple. And that was in 1984.
Wow.
And so how long, I mean, I don't think Catholic priests will even do that today. So there is just a sense of love for your neighbor and love for people who are different than you, that I would encourage people, if this is a community, if Judaism is a community that brings you happiness, and that's a great thing.
And maybe not to, I'm putting words in your mouth, but I'm curious how you feel about this. I have this conversation with my son a lot. Don't let the technicalities of whether the Torah is true or not stand in the way of being part of a community that feels supportive to you.
I think that's 100% right, Amy. I would, I kind of break Judaism into two strands. There's the culture and everything we've just talked about, and there's the prayer and the temple and
the formal religion,
the dogma, the dogma that says these are the rules that you should subscribe to because they were passed down to us by a higher authority. I think you can separate those.
Okay.
And to be quite blunt, people have been, the Jewish God, which is also the God of Christianity and Islam, that's only one of about 3,000 gods that have ever existed in humanity since we've been writing things down. Okay, there have been about 2,999 other gods, which you would be an atheist for all 2,999 of them. We just disagree on one, because we agree on those 2,999 other gods that have existed. We just disagree on one of them. So we're really more closely aligned in that sense.
For sure.
But those other 2,999, they have cultures too.
For sure.
And that may be what people, what benefits people as well. As long as, I always go down to, as long as you're not hurting other people, I think any group that makes you feel good and gives you kind of the needs that you have.
And purpose and meaning.
Absolutely. That there's nothing wrong with that.
I like that. And I'm glad that your Jewish education has allowed you to see the not throw out the baby with the bathwater. That you can see positives, that you can appreciate the good things, and struggle, with the intellectual challenges. I think most honest adults, rabbis included, have the same questions that you have. Wonder about God's existence, wonder about where God is when suffering's happening in the world, wonder about lots of parts of the Torah. Of parts of the Torah, are problematic.
Right.
I think there's some.
So how do you, and I know I'm not supposed to ask you questions until the end, but how do you wrap your head around that. And let me just give you an example. So the Torah was written 6,000 or so years ago. The Torah says that that the earth came before the sun, and that slavery is not only moral, but it actually teaches you how to own people as property. That stoning women for certain offenses is perfectly acceptable. Um, how do you wrap your head around the fact that science has kind of proven some things in the Torah to be just flatly false? And if you are able to just accept that, isn't that just kind of cherry picking?
Okay. Yes. There is some cherry picking that happens, in all honesty. But for me, so first the science question. For me, well, even more broadly, the Torah is not a science book. And it's really not even a history book. The Torah is, in my opinion, the guide for the moral questions that you bring up. So I don't really need to look to the Torah to decide when human beings were created or how they were created. I am actually looking to the Torah for the why. What are we supposed to do? And at the same time, lots of things in the Torah don't go well. The whole book of Genesis is all about family conflict. Nobody's doing it right.
Right.
They get kicked out of the garden on the first day. They get drowned in a flood by the second parsha. Abraham has multiple kind of ethical challenges and errors that he makes from my modern point of view.
Sure.
So the Torah is not there to teach me science. It's not even there to teach me exactly how to do things. Lots of times it's an example of what not to do. But the process of studying Torah and looking at those narratives and then commenting on them and seeing the tradition. To me, the Torah is interlinked, which maybe in a way lots of modern Jews don't have this experience, which I only got when I was 25 and went to rabbinical school. Sadly, our education system is sorely lacking in giving adults an adult understanding of our own religion.
It's a great point.
But yeah, we're not Hebrew school Jews anymore.
You stopped teaching.
Right. And I used to kind of give this speech to bar mitzvah parents. Are you going to stop teaching your kids math at 13?
Right.
What kind of sophisticated education are they going to have? And religion, all the more so, that guides our inner life and that guides our spirituality and guides how we interact with human beings. That is the most important education that we have to do in our lifetimes. And to do it without instruction and without precedent, without teachers, we're leaving young people out completely adrift without some kind of spiritual education. In my teacher hat, I feel that very strongly, that there's so much education that needs to come after bar mitzvah and into high school and lifelong. Judaism is about learning. And so that's my long way of saying that the Torah and its interpretations through the generations teaches me actually more than the Torah does. And so it's a little bit cherry picking. I'm intellectually honest, and that, lots of things in the Torah, even with their commentary, I still don't like them. The stoning, or the sota, or the ben sorer moreh, the rebellious son that, gets brought to witnesses and is excommunicated. Lots of things from the Torah are not, are just not okay. And at the same time, I like being part of a tradition that struggles with that.
Yeah, for sure.
And I like, even if I can't find the exact answer or the exact unraveling of that difficulty, I don't like where they land lots of times, because it's not far enough for me as a modern, thinker. But I like that we're part of that tradition, and I like that they struggled with it. I'm not the first one to look at, the idolatrous woman, or the adulterous woman, or the irreverent child, and say that's really not so great. We're not going to do that anymore. Yeah. And the rabbis of the tradition of not my generation, but the Talmudic rabbis, like our rabbinic Judaism, already, like in the first generation, after the closing of the Torah, let's say, whatever year that was already struggling with that, was already looking at it and saying, yeah, we need, capital punishment. That's a very popular example. The rabbinic courts have never, ever, ever allowed capital punishment, ever.
I remember that as part of the story of Jesus, actually, right?
Say more. What do you mean?
My recollection of that is that that there was a concern about Jesus claiming to be the King of the Jews,
right?
And that the rabbis could not punish him.
Oh, good point.
So
yes,
that
yes,
they basically suggested that the
Romans
do
it.
so.
Yes, exactly. We are not. They basically legislated the idea of capital punishment out of the Torah, even though it says clearly you can stone someone, kill someone, they're liable for death because of these crimes, but it's never happened in Jewish history. And I didn't put that together with the Jesus example, but yes, exactly that. They legislated, all of these conditions. The witnesses have to bring exactly the same testimony word for word.
Mhm.
They will have had to warn the murderer before he even committed the murder. All sorts of things that are impossible to exist in real life are in the rabbinic literature about capital punishment. And basically that's an extreme example, but almost every forget that thought, scrap that out. Scrap that, Jonathan. But my point is that we're part of I like to remind myself and others that we're part of a long tradition and a broad tradition. And when we focus on the Torah, we're not Torah Jews. We're actually not Torah Jews. We're rabbinic Jews, which means that we're Jews of the Mishnah, which came in the year 200 CE. We're Jews of the Talmud, which was a compendium, like bookshelves and bookshelves of law and discussion about the statements in the Torah that are oftentimes literally reversed. They take tremendous creative license in switching things. There's a law in the Torah that says that in the seventh year, all debts are canceled. Well, who's going to give a loan in the sixth year if debts are canceled in the seventh year? Right. So a rabbi came in, around the year 100 and said, this is really messing up our economic system. We need to have something called a prose bowl. We need to have a document that will allow people, because people are suffering. They can't get loans. They can't do business, and people are not going to be able to be repaid. He reversed the entire Torah law. It happens more frequently than I think. I
don't think most people know this.
Exactly. That's my point. So there's a whole universe of interpretation that doesn't undo the Torah, but that really is quite rigorous in finding ways for it to be more palatable and to be more realistic and to work with modernity. And that's why, in my opinion, so I'm just going to say one more thing. And
no, please keep going.
But that's why Judaism has actually survived, because we're not literalists. We're not black and white. We have this tradition. You brought up the Holocaust period. Obviously, people weren't keeping kosher in the Holocaust period the way that they would have before. We weren't lighting Shabbos candles. There were so many times that Judaism has had to amend and adapt, God forbid the Holocaust. But even in other times, you live in whatever, Egypt, your traditions are going to be different than your traditions in Spain. And it was common. Judaism has survived because it is malleable and it's flexible and it's interpreted. And actually from the Torah itself, we learn that it's not in heaven. Like, it's actually a very famous idea that the Torah is not meant to be in heaven. And even Moses, sorry, one more thing.
No,
there's the famous teaching about Moses coming into the study hall of someone many, many generations later. And he doesn't know what the heck's going on. He doesn't recognize the Torah because it's so evolved from where he received it. And I like that metaphor, obviously. Our generation could never have imagined 1,000 years ago, or Rashi's generation or Maimonides' generation could not have imagined ours. We can't imagine the future. But the link that we have is Judaism, and the link that we have is looking at those traditions and trying to make them not in heaven but on earth so we can live them. Okay, end of rant.
No, it wasn't a rant. It was actually quite eloquent, and I thought very well said. The one question I had while you were going on your rant, because it sounded to me, but I don't want to put words in your mouth, that the Torah and all the liturgy that comes afterwards are more kind of philosophical than they and instructional than they are faith-based. And the reason, and as I was thinking about that and everything that you said, the one word that didn't come out of your mouth
was God.
Was the word God. What role does that play in everything that you just discussed? And perhaps more importantly, why is that necessary? Because I agree with you on the idea of finding things, whether it's in a book or in a song or something that, or in a poem that gives meaning to your life and gives you instructions on how to live a good life. There's nothing at all wrong with that. I mean, there are philosophy books all over the place that will tell you how to live a good moral life. The question ultimately becomes, why is faith in a God, and this doesn't just go to obviously Judaism, why is that necessary?
Why can't we just use the wisdom without the divine source?
Yeah, right.
Well, the honest answer is I think we can. I think we can, and I think we do. I think a lot of Jews actually do. We celebrate Shabbat, not because we think God is going to punish us for not celebrating Shabbat or resting on Shabbat, but because it has its own value. And actually, that's a beautiful Jewish teaching that, a mitzvah that we do, the reward for the mitzvah is the mitzvah. That way you get to do the mitzvah.
Right.
And I really like that. It's not that God's going to pat you on the head and say, good job, or keeping score, 1 mitzvah for you, 2 mitzvahs for me. It's that the enjoyment of actually honoring those commandments, which is like, it's the technical word, but it's not really the spiritual word, for commandment. And I'd love to brainstorm what a better word than commandment would be, because it sounds like legalistic and oppressive, and we don't like to be told what to do. So who wants some, tradition telling us what to do? But anyways, I forgot where all that was going.
Sounded good.
Okay. But so back to the divine. So I do think lots of times we pick and choose. That's the modern world. We're allowed choice. We're allowed free will. We choose the things that are meaningful for us, and we don't necessarily have to hook it back to because God, I would say most of the time we don't hook it back to because God said so. I don't know any people who just say, well, I do this because God said so.
Well, that's obviously the problem with fanatics, right?
Things get misinterpreted.
They get misinterpreted, but that doesn't mean they're not sincerely held beliefs.
True.
Right?
Yeah.
And so we think about the jihadists and we think they're crazy. Right? How could however many people fly planes into the Twin Towers? They must be insane. Guess what? They're not insane. They actually had sincerely held beliefs that were drilled into them through dogma, and obviously that makes so one of the reasons why Judaism is such a wonderful religion, I guess you would say, is because they just don't drill things into your head. But there are fanatics in the Jewish religion, just like there are in Christianity and Islam and probably lots of others. But I appreciate the honesty in what part of your faith comes from the notion of a God versus what comes from everything that kind of came from that book afterwards. I think that that was very well said, and was not expecting that. But at the same time, there are people whose minds are much more closed off, and that is more of a concern than I wish everybody had that same view.
Well, I think look, in Judaism, we're broad. We're a big tent.
For sure.
And there are people who would not say what I said. Obviously, that mitzvot, they come directly from God and we're commanded, and not everything makes sense. I actually remember a teacher saying to us in rabbinical school, Rabbi Lebo, I always refer to my really a beloved teacher, Rabbi Bill Lebo, and he would say, a lot of the mitzvot make sense, and Maimonides actually had this struggle too, the great thinker of the 12th century, there are rational mitzvot and there are irrational mitzvot. Brit milah, circumcision, not so rational, and so when you have a congregant that's coming to you say, I'm not so sure about that whole bris thing. I want my kid to be Jewish. I want them to have a Jewish name. We're a Jewish family, but I'm not sure about the bris. So that's a tough one. And he would say, sometimes you really just need to counsel people. Not everything is rational. And as much as we want it to be, we're modern people. We want things to make sense. We want to have some scientific, we can kosher now. People think, okay, it keeps the animals a little more clean or a little more humane. But there are some categories of things that just are not always going to make sense. And that is part of it. That's part of it. And part of, I don't subscribe to this exactly, but I do think about it a lot. Part of the exercise of being a spiritual human being is letting go. Like you said, we don't have to know the answer to everything. And in some ways it's kind of freeing.
Right.
I don't have to create Shabbat. Wow. Oh my God, how amazing. Wednesday would actually be better for my schedule, but it's actually Saturday. And that's where I'm gonna hook my wagon to that train. It's gonna be okay. I don't have to invent everything. How lonely and how challenging it would be if we had to create every tradition or commandment we would be, and how limited. I think of this a lot in terms of prayer. You ask about prayer and kind of how we relate to a God that we're not really sure exactly what that concept is, but lots of things in the prayer book I would not know to pray for. And so I like that.
Sure,
like that.
That's fair.
I would hopefully pray for peace. I would pray for people that I love that may be suffering with something. I would hopefully pray for my neighbors, pray for good health and good fortune for the people that I care about. But my brain we're limited as human beings. And so sometimes the prayer book and the tradition opens us to things that we might not do otherwise. And I rest easier knowing that I am not the architect of, even my own. I am the architect of my own spiritual life, but I'm not the architect of this whole big tradition. I like resting on the shoulders of someone else. I like standing on the shoulders of people that I think were really quite brilliant and believed in this. That's my argument, or my rebuttal to my son when he says, why, Passover, Schmassover, we didn't really go out of Egypt and blah, blah, blah. And I said, yeah, but Rashi thought we did. And Maimonides thought we did. And, many other like commentators those were not dumb people. And if it was good enough for them, in some ways, I take it on faith, it's good enough for me. And also they added to it and they learned from it. And so and my voice counts too. So I like that modern aspect that we can, we really are commanded to debate. When the blessing for studying the Torah is not to read the Torah. It's different than what we say at a bar mitzvah. It's la'asok b'divrei Torah, which means to engage in words of Torah, which really means to do this, to fight, to argue, to be occupied with words of Torah, not to memorize, not to regurgitate, but to contemplate and to reflect. And I think that's actually very reflective of what the Jewish purpose of study is and what the purpose of the Torah is. Not to digest it and blah 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 it out, but to bring it into our hearts and souls and to think about it and to interact with it and bring our own voice.
I appreciate this. I'm learning a lot, and that was one of the things that I really wanted to get out of this discussion.
Well, this will be to be continued. Yeah. This is going to be like a 10-part series.
Right? We could do this forever. Well, let me ask you my question. Okay. The question that I did pose to you earlier. But it may not be as relevant as I thought it was going to be, based on this discussion so far. But the question is this: what fact or reason would cause you to stop believing in God? And if nothing would, how is that belief any different from any other belief that cannot be disproven?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you did give me a heads up, but I didn't really.
Busy.
I did think about it. Nothing like immediately came to my mind for how exactly to answer that. In terms of my own faith, to me, it's a choice. I choose to believe that there's some purpose. Not that everything makes sense, obviously, kids die, terrible things happen. And I also choose to believe in a God who's good, but maybe not all powerful. I gave up that one.
Yeah, that's the toughest one to wrap your head around,
right?
It
is. It's intellectually impossible for God to be both good and all powerful in my soul. Those don't jive to me, because there is too much bad and evil and difficulty in the world, and I cannot believe in a God who would control that.
To my point, let a child die an excruciating death from bone cancer.
Of course, or any kind of suffering. So I do cherry pick kind of my beliefs about God. And at the same time, I learned something from a professor many years ago that really allows me to have a little space for the possibility of a divine being that I just don't understand. And my brain is probably never going to understand. And his teaching, this is Rabbi Neil Gilman, who is an amazing teacher, passed away quite a few years ago now. But he had a concept of the second naivete, which is that when we're 13 or 14 and the bubble bursts, that God, everybody's not good, and God doesn't control everything, and God's not Santa Claus sitting on a cloud in heaven, giving you presents. When we realize that God is not that whatever our childhood theology gets broken, we can either stay broken, okay, and just say, well, it must not exist because the world has pain and suffering, and I didn't get what I wanted for Christmas last year, my team didn't win, or whatever, all these things I prayed for. Or we can come into the second naivete, where God, we can still believe in God and not have that. We can let go of the power piece. We can believe that there's a divine force, a spiritual force. It could be, and I think even as human beings, we don't really have language for this enough. And Rabbi Gilman would talk a lot about that too, that we need more words and more descriptions, both in English and in Hebrew, for how to describe. And in Hebrew, we have so many names for God and so many descriptions of God as a rock, as part of the heavens, as a feminine force, all of these different things which kind of get lost in the God word in English. But I really, in my adult life, have gravitated to this idea of a second naivete, where we can believe in God, even though we know bad things happen to good people. And even though we know we could pray for something that's not going to come out the way we want.
Right.
And that's comforting to me, for sure. Actually.
For sure. How does, just out of curiosity, how does your current thinking of faith differ from the 21-year-old Amy Rader?
Yeah. I mean, I would say probably at 21, I was pretty skeptical. And I'm still pretty skeptical. But I think, as you get older, I say to my son a lot when we have these debates, I don't need to know the answer to that. Like you said at the beginning, I don't need to know the answer to that. That's okay. I don't need to know whether it was created in 6 days or 7 days or billions of years, which is obviously more likely. That's not my job. My job is to take, both personally and professionally, but really, I mean personally now, my job is to take what's been given to me as my inheritance as a Jewish person in this world and wrestle with it. We're the children of Israel, and Israel means wrestling. It means that's the name that Jacob got when he wrestled with the angel. We're not meant to swallow it wholesale. We're not meant to regurgitate quotes and verses and speak in tongues like that. We're meant to struggle, and I think that gives us sharpness, and that sharpness in an intellectual way, that I'm proud of. I'm proud of the fact that we have 64 volumes of Talmud that have been doing this for literally 2,000 years. I want to be part of that. That's an exciting conversation to me, because we're never going to run out of things to argue about. Yay. And I think also very relevantly for our modern world, we're really good at arguing, but still loving each other. And that to me is a gift that I'm super grateful for in this reality that we live in, and that I think Judaism actually comes to share with the world. Honestly, if we can model for people and communities, how to disagree with respect and civility and honor, really knowing that the person that we're disagreeing with still is not only God's creation, but someone we respect and that we want to argue with. That's where our world needs to go.
Couldn't agree more. To disagree without being disagreeable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And this has been just illuminating beyond words.
Oh, thanks, Stuart.
Thank you. Let's continue it another time.
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for having me.